bought this guitar because I love Alexi Laiho. And I know this is a Rhoads V, and Randy Rhoads is a great guitarist too, but I really like Alexi from Children of Bodom. He's got his own ESP version, the Alexi series, some different colored bevel options. They don't have this white pickguard. They're actually a little bigger body than this, though this is a big enough body, and I think I'm a little taller and bigger than Alexi anyways. So he's kind of a small guy with an extra big guitar. This is a pretty good-sized guitar body. I think it's already pretty long compared to most, but this was a lot cheaper than any of the ESP Alexis, and it's, you know, similar shape. It's got the white bevels and black body. The classic Alexi to me is the one with the yellow bevels that he played around 2009. I think that's the first one I saw of his, and that's always been like the ultimate Alexi, but those are like $2,500, and this only cost me $450 new. So I went ahead and got this because it looks similar, and I also didn't have a guitar with a Floyd Rose, and that is the other reason I got this. I don't typically like tremolo systems, like the Fender style trem systems are not my favorite. I do have a guitar with a Bigsby vibrato, and that I like a little better. It doesn't go out of tune as much. It also doesn't change the pitch very much. You can, you know, go pretty extreme with it, and it only does maybe a half step or less. That's a pretty mild trem system, so it doesn't go out of tune as much as a Fender style. But the double locking Floyd Rose is a lot of fun. So let's talk about, is this guitar good? Is it worth the money? Should you pick one up if you're looking for a Floyd Rose or a Rhoads V? This just came in, and I've taken it out of the box to inspect everything. Now, this was used. It was listed as mint condition, and it's pretty mint. It still has the clear plastic film. However, there is a touch of corrosion, and I saw this listing was up for a whole year, so I suppose this was sitting around the factory. It's nothing bad, but there's a tiny bit of corrosion on the frets I'm going to have to clean up. This fretboard looks like it could use some oil anyways. One obvious issue here is a few of the screws are showing some rust and corrosion. Now, that probably didn't come from the factory like that, and the seller is a music store. I'm not going to say who it is because I'm not here to badmouth them. It doesn't bother me terribly, though. It's not a great sign to see some rust on a brand new guitar. There's also some fine scratches here, which you can see on camera. I don't know if I could buff that out with some fine sandpaper, but it's on the back of the guitar, so it doesn't really bother me. The neck is unfinished, and I might hit it with some fine sandpaper because it's a touch rough. Nothing bad. Some people might like it extra grippy, but I think with maybe some 2,000, 3,000 grit sandpaper, it might be a little bit smoother, and that might be nice. One area I'll have to address is some fret sprout, and by some I mean a lot. It would definitely cut through a paper towel or something. It's going to have to be dealt with a fret end file, and it seems to be pretty much all the frets, so that's not great, but I had a similar thing happen on a brand new Schecter. When it first came in, after a few weeks, it developed some fret sprout. It's not too easy to see it, but you can certainly feel it. Not hard for me to deal with. That's something I kind of expect to happen sometimes, but not a great sign, but not the end of the world. Otherwise, the fretboard looks good so far. I'm going to check it with a fret rocker and see how that does. Let's check this with the fret rocker. We have a slight high spot at the 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 5th fret, tiny bit at the 12th fret, a little bit at the 17th fret, pretty significant there actually, 20th fret, 21st fret, and the 23rd fret. Not so terrible and not that unusual again for a budget guitar. I will want to do some fret crowning on that. It's probably the kind of thing that you could ignore safely. You know, this isn't anything to freak out about, but it's not like perfect fretwork. Though you're not going to expect that on a $400 guitar. I was going to do a little playing demo and see how it played before doing any fret work. But while it's not terrible, there's some corrosion on the frets that I wanted to clean up. I'd like to sort out the high frets. They're not so terrible. If I didn't know how to do this, it would be perfectly playable, I'm sure. But since this was used and in storage, these frets are just kind of a bit corroded and yellowed, and I wanted to clean them up. I wanted to hydrate this fretboard, and especially because it is a Floyd Rose, everything takes a little more time to get it set up and tuned. So I'm going to just take care of that first. I would say everything here is pretty standard for the problems you might see in a budget guitar. And for the new player, that could be a bit difficult if they just wanted to buy something off the rack. Now, some stores may do a good job of setting it up and cleaning it, though on a $400 guitar, probably going to be limited in that. You might also just take it to a professional tech if you want to get these problems taken care of. Spot leveling your frets and cleaning and polishing everything is something that would be good for all guitar players to do, even though I'm sure it's a minority. The more I get into fretwork and setup on guitars, the more I notice things and it bothers me. So what may not be an issue for someone just starting, to me, is a problem that I'm immediately going to fix. So I was just giving it a test run, and I immediately broke a string. Well, not quite immediately, but after a few sick dive bombs and yanking up on it, testing out the tuning stability. Number one, I found it does not keep perfect tune yet, so I don't know if that's because the strings are new, even though they're old and they should have settled in. I'm going to go with these 10 to 52 nickel wound, which means I'm going to have to set up the bridge again, for the first time. And put it in D standard, I think. That's what I'm going to go with. I don't want to go too low with this. Got a lot of super low tuned guitars, but D standard for Alexi. That's what he used a lot. And this is kind of my Children of Bodom knockoff guitar. Rest in peace, brother. But now I've got the fun task of trying to figure out how a Floyd Rose bridge works. I gotta say, it was pretty well set up from the factory. It's not now, but it was floating pretty parallel from the factory setup when it was perfectly in tune. It wasn't perfectly parallel with the body of the guitar, which is what you want with these, but it was pretty close when it was all in tune. So it was not a bad factory setup. Try to hold the bridge parallel and tell you what the action is before I do any tweaking of that. It's right about 3/64, which is where I want it. That's kind of what I shoot for now as a goal. And it didn't seem to have a whole lot of buzz. There's a little bit of fret buzz, but since I took down the high frets, it shouldn't be too bad. So the action's set right about where I want it, and the fretwork I did should have hopefully cleaned up some of the fret buzz. So I just got to figure out how to set up a Floyd Rose bridge, and I'm not going to give you a tutorial on that because I don't know. Fret sprout, if you've ever played a guitar with it, the fret ends are sharp. You really can't play on that safely until you deal with it or take it to a shop. So that was number one. That doesn't take too long, maybe 30 minutes or an hour to clean up the fret ends. And if you have a fret end dressing file, it can be done nicely. And the result is pretty clean. You don't really see anything. So the fingerboard was also pretty dry. And the frets had a little bit of corrosion on them, maybe just from sitting around for a year. So I polished up the frets and I gave it a little bit of lemon oil on the fingerboard to help hydrate that wood because it looked a little bit gray and sad. But no cracks. The wood itself of the maple neck is not the finest I've ever seen. You can see there's some knots in there. It's not a bad piece of wood, and the shape is fine. The workmanship is fine. It was a little bit rough feeling in terms of the sanding. Not rough, but like just a little bit too unfinished feeling. So I smoothed the back of the net with some high grit sandpaper, probably 3,000 or 4,000, just to give it a nice finish so it doesn't feel quite so dry and raw. I have seen better quality wood on cheap guitars, but wood is variable and it depends. The JS32 series starts, I think, around $275 for some of the finishes. This guitar comes in both the hardtail and the Floyd Rose version. The Floyd Rose version, I think, adds about $100 to the price tag. And then there's some different finish options. There's a natural and there's a couple matte finishes in a solid color. In that sense, this is probably made about to the same quality level as the sub $300 guitar. So in that sense, while this one cost $450, there are cheaper models in this line. I imagine that the JS32 all pull from the same pile of parts in terms of necks and everything. I also did a little bit of spot leveling of the frets, and that's something that's optional. But if you want to get the lowest possible action, having really level frets is going to help you to get there. So I went ahead and spent an hour or two doing a little bit of extra spot leveling, making the frets as level as possible so that I could get the action as low as possible. And I did take it down to the factory specs of, I think, 430 seconds on the low E and 330 seconds on the high E. Jackson does provide a card with these guitars that tells you the factory specs for setup, which is nice. Not all guitars do that. So I like to see what their factory specs are supposed to be. It wasn't quite set up to those specs. I did have to lower the action. Adjusting the action and setup on a Floyd Rose is definitely an extra pain. The main reason it took a while to set this guitar up to where I was happy with it was the Floyd Rose setup. And that's another reason that I bought this guitar, because I wanted to learn how to set up a Floyd Rose. I never have set up a Floyd Rose before, so it was kind of a good learning experience. And yeah, everything takes like 3-4 times as long on a Floyd Rose. But I knew that going into it, and this was also my first time. So that has nothing to do really with the quality of the guitar, but expect that if you're buying a Floyd Rose guitar, that setups are going to be a little more difficult and certainly more time consuming. It's not that hard, but you do have to make sure that the bridge is really level. You have to do a lot of tuning all the time just to make sure that what you're doing in terms of setup is going to stick and is going to be accurate. If the strings aren't exactly in tune, it's going to change the angle of the bridge, and then you might think the bridge angle is wrong and adjust the screws in the back of it to tighten those springs. And that's not going to be what you want to do. I mean, you have to constantly make sure it's exactly in tune and then take measurements, make some adjustments, tune it again, measure it, tune, measure, and this whole kind of cycle of adjustments, getting it to where you want it to be. And once you've done that, you better hope that your string gauge is not going to change anytime soon. So I did put slightly thicker strings on this. I put this guitar in D standard with 10s, and I'm going to keep the exact same brand and gauge of strings as long as I can until I decide I want to change tuning or something. But I'm going to be less likely to do that on this guitar than some of my others, because it's a real pain to change the tuning, because then you got to change the setup. And as I said, that takes a while. That's just the case with any Floyd Rose. As far as the licensed Floyd Rose on this guitar, I don't have any issues with it. I know they're made of slightly cheaper materials, so in the long term, maybe with enough adjustment, things will start to wear out sooner. But other than that, I mean, once it's set up well, I have had no issues with it. I've done my setup on it. I've got it to where I'm happy with it. I don't have a original Floyd Rose to compare it to, but as far as tuning stability, it seems fine. No Floyd Rose, as far as I know, and as Herman Lee explained, no Floyd Rose stays exactly in tune. If you do a big dive bomb on a Floyd Rose, it's not going to return 100% exactly to pitch, and you can kind of do a little pull up on the bar after that and kind of wiggle it, and you can just wiggle it back in tune. It helps to have a tuner, like if you're recording, have a tuner open on your computer or on your headstock so you can see where the pitch is, because you can usually get it back into tune just by wiggling the bridge a little bit. You do that little trick. If you do that and you check your pitch, you can get back to pitch, but you may just fiddle with it a little bit. Herman Lee, the Floyd Rose expert, was talking about this and saying this is something that happens on pretty much all his guitars. So that just seems to be the nature of these. A Floyd Rose will stay in tune if your guitar is just sitting around, better than anything else. You may need to do some fine tuning, and at a certain point, the adjustment screws on the bridge may kind of bottom out, and you'll need to undo the locking nuts to use the tuners to get it back to pitch and reset those fine tuners. But for the most part, you can just use the fine tuners just to keep it perfectly in tune, and it won't really go very out of tune. So you can tune less often, but it's not an ever tune or something. You do need to check the pitch, but they stay in tune a lot better than any other guitar. You do pay extra if you want this beveled paint job. It's like an extra $50, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's sharp. The paint job is pretty clean. The finish seems good. Since this was an open box, there was some fine scratches here and there. That's kind of normal with gloss guitars. They will get a little bit scratched up. I've got no issues with the pickups. I'm not really a pickup snob. I think the guitar sounds good. I think most pickups sound just fine, if not almost identical to each other. I know that's a hot take, but it is what it is. They're passive pickups. They sound like pickups, and they do a good job. If that upsets you, I'm sorry, but I think the pickups are good. I don't notice them being particularly different to any other pickups I have. The tuners seem good for as far as I've used them. They don't really have to hold their pitch perfectly because we've got a locking nut anyways, but they're smooth. They feel high quality. I don't have any complaints with them. They're metal. You can get some spring noise and stuff on a Floyd Rose, so I did put some foam pieces in between the strings as well as behind the nut just to dampen some of that echoiness, because you will hear that through the amp, especially when you tap on it. If you stick some foam pieces in between the springs, you can cut down a lot on that kind of built-in spring reverb that a Floyd has, and it doesn't really seem to affect the performance of the Floyd at all. You don't want to jam anything way too tight in there, I guess. Just some little blocks of foam there are enough to kind of touch the springs and dampen their resonance. All in all, I think it's a solid guitar. If you don't care about the Floyd Rose and you don't care about the beveled finish, you can get quite a good deal for one of the other JS32 models. In terms of value, I think if you get the cheaper models, it's certainly a great deal. This being the top of the line, just because of the paint job and the Floyd Rose, at $450, it's a good deal. I'm happy with it. I don't think it's a bad guitar. I think at that price range, you might find other guitars that play even better out of the box in terms of maybe factory setup, fretwork, maybe quality, but I don't know that I'm the best judge for that because I don't work in a guitar shop, so I'm not the expert on like the market and what $450 will get you currently in the guitar market. So the price to me is good. It's fair. I wish that it had had a little bit better care and setup out of the box. If someone was a new guitarist, if this was their first guitar, they don't know anything about setup, they don't know anything about, fretwork, that could be a problem for someone who's new to guitar, but you could take it to a guitar shop. I also wouldn't recommend that you buy a guitar with a Floyd Rose if this is your first guitar, because they're going to be a real pain to maintain. You're going to have to take it to a shop, and it's just something that you should get into later. I've been playing close to 20 years now, which makes me feel a little bit old, but I've never had a Floyd Rose guitar, not one that I've owned. I've had Fender trem systems and a Bigsby, but I've never really been into trem systems. I don't have an Evertune, so this was a little bit outside of my comfort range, but that's also kind of why I got it. And I think it's fun playing with Floyd Rose. I think if you're going to go for a tremolo, you want the whammy bar, you want to do the dime bag squeals, get a Floyd Rose, get one that's cheap. I don't think that you can really go too wrong with something like a licensed Floyd Rose on a cheaper guitar like this. I was worried that it was going to be a piece of junk and I would have to immediately replace it. But even if I did go out and buy an official Floyd Rose, the total for this guitar would still be less than any new guitar with an official Floyd Rose. You have to generally pay over $2,000 to get a guitar with an actual official Floyd Rose from the factory. And if you just buy the part itself, I think with the locking nuts, the whole system, it's less than $350. If you buy a guitar with licensed Floyd Rose, the routing's already done, it's ready to go. You can just swap in the official bridge down the road if you ever want to. I don't know that I will, unless I absolutely trash this thing and it breaks on me or something. I don't know that I will bother to replace the bridge because I think the licensed Floyd Rose is fine. At least for me, for now, I don't have any real complaints with it. And if you are really set on a high-end Floyd Rose, I'd either shop used or consider a cheaper guitar like this and put in an official Floyd Rose. I've also never owned a Jackson before. They're known for their cool shapes. I bought this guitar for the looks and the Floyd Rose. It's a cool looking axe. It's sometimes hard to film because it's hard to see just how sick it is on camera without being pretty far away from the camera. So filming it has been a little bit tricky because it is so long and pointy, but that's my problem as the cameraman. It's a sick guitar. I enjoy playing it. I hope you enjoy hearing it. As always, smash like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.